Hey everyone, it's your favorite gentleman, Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show. And today we have the incredible Miss Nicole Wilson. And she is here today to educate us. She's been sharing her love for the leaf on her blog since 2008. And since then, tea has connected people worldwide and opened more doors than she could have ever imagined. And today we have this incredible woman here on the Gentleman Style Podcast here to enlighten us. Tea is historical. Tea has a history. Tea has a pulse to it. And she is here to help us peel back those layers and peel back those onions behind some of the mysteries, besides the health and wellness aspect of it, but the historical mindset behind this incredible tea. So help me welcome to the stage the incredible Miss Nicole Wilson. Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making time to be here on the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. You are in a unique niche, and you've been blogging about this, like we read in your bio, since 2008. But so, what inspired your passion for tea and its history? What caused you to find your love and your love and passion for this?
Yeah, so I grew up always drinking tea. My mom still drinks quite a lot of tea, just her, standard grocery store tea bags with milk and sugar. But when I went away to college, I discovered loose leaf tea. And it was this real rabbit hole where, I was just super fascinated. First of all, I'd never even seen tea that didn't come in a tea bag before. But then I started learning about all of the different cultures that celebrate tea and all of the different aspects of history that tea is involved in. At that time, I got really lucky where I found a website that was looking for staff tea reviewers. So they would send me these big packets with like 100 different teas from all over the world. So I got a really great early education, where usually that's something that's a bit more of a gradual journey. And so I initially started my blog as a way to back up the writing I was doing for them, but then it kind of took on a life of its own after that.
Absolutely. Were you looking for that career, that job, or did they just find you because of something else you were doing while you were in
Yeah,
college?
so I was just looking to learn more about tea, and it was a website where they had like a bunch of different people writing about tea, with the idea of like, if multiple people review the same tea, then you will get different opinions and know if that tea is a tea that you would enjoy if you have different perspectives on it, since taste is so subjective. And so it was just super just out of the blue that I discovered them on Google, and it just kind of went from there.
That is so unique. So that's how you got into tea. What kept you learning and discovering and continuing to learn more and not losing the passion? Because unlike a traditional job, once you leave that job, do you still do that work for Google?
Yeah, well, it's not for Google, but it was like a website that I found. But they eventually did shut down after doing that for a few years. I still work full time, like outside of tea, but I always say that that's just my like pay rent job. Tea is my real job. So it's definitely something I'm still super passionate about. One of the things I really love about tea is there's always something new to learn. Even if it's been almost 17 years, I'm still learning new things every day. I'm still taking courses about tea and trying new things, learning new things, talking to new people. And so that's really what keeps me going and keeps me interested in it.
Absolutely. So I wanted to tap into your knowledge base. Where
Sure.
does tea come from?
Yes. So tea is an evergreen plant that's native to China. So that's where it's originally from. And so the tea plant is called Camellia sinensis. So it's actually related to the decorative camellias that people might grow in their garden. It just happens to be one of the few species of camellia that tastes really good if you brew the leaves.
Mm, it's delicious. And what is your favorite tea?
That's almost an impossible question. I really love all tea. I always kind of cheat and say oolong. It's the most diverse category of tea because it has the biggest range of oxidation level. So you can find something that's really very green and flowery, or something that's really dark and roasty. So you can almost find any kind of taste you might want just within the oolong category. So that's usually my like out on answering that question, just because it's impossible for me to pick this one.
It is so many. How many variations are of tea, are
Yeah,
there?
so I mean, there are thousands of kinds of tea.
Thousands.
There's different varieties of the tea plant, different cultivars. They're grown in different places. The leaves are processed in different ways. There's six main categories of tea. So the level of oxidation, which is like, if you cut open an apple slice and you leave it out on the counter, it'll start to turn brown. That's basically what happens to the tea leaves after they're harvested. And so the teas will range from green tea, which is the least oxidized, to black tea, which is the most oxidized. But there's an incredible amount of diversity there that, again, I think that's part of why I'm still so interested in tea, because it's impossible for me to try every tea in the world.
That's fair. And so oxidation. So just to recap, oxidation. Forgive me. Oxidation is a good thing or a bad thing for the
Yeah,
tea leaves?
it's a good thing. So it's a very controlled process. The person who's making the tea basically allows the leaves to oxidize the amount that they want them to, and it's just really a chemical reaction within the leaves that changes the flavor. Green tea is very grassy, and so as it starts to oxidize, you lose that grassy flavor. So that's why like black tea doesn't have that grassiness that green tea does. And so basically during the tea making process, they'll apply heat to the leaves to stop oxidation, and that kind of freezes it where the tea maker wants the tea to be.
That sounds incredible. Absolutely, absolutely. I wanted to ask, are there any routines? So, like, one of the things, like for wine, there's a routine that you have to do to clear your palate whenever you're tasting various wines. Are there any particular habits or any things you do to develop and refine your palate for identifying different tea flavors amongst the various teas? You said there's thousands. Are there any things, habits, or routines that you do to help your palate be prepared for the distinguishing flavors and keynotes in a tea?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's actually quite a lot of similarity between tea and wine when it comes to tasting. Right before I taste tea, I definitely will avoid things with strong flavors, anything that's like very spicy or anything like that that might hinder my ability to taste the tea. It helps to drink some like room temperature water, so that it's not too cold, because cold water can also kind of numb your senses in a sense. Definitely tasting a lot of teas really helps develop your palate. Just getting to learn what different teas should taste like, seeing what different notes you do pick up in them. Also, I think a lot of it has to do with really being very mindful of the flavors that you're encountering on a daily basis. Taste is actually primarily really what we're smelling. And so, paying attention to all the little things that you experience in life, every flower you pass, every food you eat, they're all like references that you can go back to in your mind when you're tasting to try to describe what it is that you're tasting in a tea.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Have you noticed any trends or innovations in tea tasting lately? Any nuances or any, like, everything is, technology is changing, right? There's 3D printing, there's all kinds of technology. There's roasting, um, air fryers, right? Technology is changing every single day. Have you noticed any technological advances in tea, or do people typically like to taste it traditionally, the traditional way, steaming it, boiling it, those types of methods? Have you noticed anything?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say when it comes to processing tea, really in the last, just the last century, there's been a ton of innovation in, the way that we are processing tea, the way we're harvesting tea. Tea traditionally was something that was handpicked, which, if you can imagine, that is very labor intensive, very time consuming, and ultimately can be very expensive, especially, if you're making tea in a place that doesn't necessarily have labor available. That can make it really difficult to make tea. And so there's definitely been a lot of innovation with being able to harvest tea mechanically instead of relying on hand picking. There's definitely been a lot of innovation on that. With tea is such an old beverage. That's the really interesting part about it, is we've been drinking tea for literally thousands of years. And so it's really fascinating to look back at, all of the different changes that tea has gone through. When people first started drinking tea, it was really meant more as a medicine. So they treated it like a medicine, and they would brew it incredibly strong. Like you wouldn't even want to drink it strong. We put onions and garlic and all kinds of stuff in it, almost like a soup. Um,
Understood.
Eventually, it turned into more of a beverage. But at that time, the teas were pressed into these hard cakes. And then they would break off a piece, grind it into a powder, and then whip that powder into water. And then they would actually put salt on it, which is interesting also. But then later on, the in China, the emperor had outlawed tea cakes because he thought they were very inconvenient. And so, they transitioned to loose leaf tea, which is what we have today. But there's just been a ton of innovation over the course of those thousands and thousands of years that I think is super fascinating when it comes to tea.
The history of tea is incredibly fascinating. When I think of tea, I think of very aristocratic, very affluent, right?
Yeah.
Tea, is that what you found in your research, that tea was typically, you said it was typically for medicine, but I also, I guess maybe I'm watching too many movies, but it seemed only for the affluent, right? It seemed
Yeah.
only for people who could afford the very best, like you said, it was harvested, and so you need to pay laborers to harvest your tea and get it imported to wherever it is, whether it be England or China. Is what you said? You said China, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I feel like it was. Why is that what you found in your research? That was typically for the affluent.
Yeah, I would say for most countries, it was only for the affluent when tea was first introduced to whichever country it may be, whether that was China, Japan, England, even here in the US. That when tea is first brought, it's this rare, precious thing. And so it typically is something that's really more for, what you would consider like the ruling class or aristocrats or the royalty. But over time, tea becomes more and more accessible because it's almost like the people in lower classes look to the people in the higher classes for what's trendy, what's popular, what's interesting. And so over time that tea then does become accessible. So I think that's a good example of, like, in England, tea originally was just really for the royalty, but then eventually became really the national drink, where we almost associate tea with England now because they really all classes drink it. So that's an interesting part of tea culture that I think is really fascinating, because you do find that in most places that it starts with the affluent and then kind of filters down to the rest of society after.
Absolutely. I love it, love it, love it. Throughout history, we've noticed, and because you stated it originated in China, there's there's some cultures that have a tradition around tea. Like it was used as a peace treaty, almost like, have sit down, have some tea with me. Let's not go to war. Have Is that what you can you shed any light on some rare or forgotten tea traditions that you have found in your blog or over the years that you've been doing this? Since 2008, you've had to have massed a significant amount of tea traditions that are so unique that you don't hear about them as much, or maybe even
Absolutely.
forgotten.
Yeah, there's many cultures where tea is really the beverage of hospitality. In countries like Morocco, for example, if you go to someone's house, you're going to drink tea, because otherwise it's incredibly rude for them not to offer it to you. And so it is really interesting to see how each culture, uses tea. But it Interestingly, tea has also been part of war at times as well. It's something that many societies consider valuable, and wars have been fought over it. In Japan, the samurai would have a matcha tea ceremony before going into battle. So it's definitely, I think you get both sides of the coin with tea, which is really interesting as well.
Absolutely. You said in Morocco it was very shocking or even rude to not offer someone tea. What about if I decline
Yeah,
tea from you? Like I come over
it
and
would
Miss
be seen as an offense. Yeah, that it's
really
just a known thing, and it's not just one cup of tea. You in Morocco, you're having at least three cups. Um,
show me the cup.
yeah, and
Show me.
it's a strong green tea with mint and sugar in it. So it's a really, like, very distinct tea culture that they've developed, which is super interesting.
Absolutely. Is tea kind of is bubble tea? I feel like boba is like the new kid on the block, right? Is
Yeah, I
is
mean,
boba tea really tea, or is that just some fad that they made up?
it depends on what you're drinking, because there's all different kinds of bubble tea. Bubble tea originally originated in Taiwan, And so originally it was really, they were mixing fruit juice with tea to make it like more attractive to younger kids. So they would shake tea with fruit juice, and it would make these bubbles like when you shake the drink. It didn't really have the like pearls that we think of now as bubble tea. Those were added later as like a new innovation to draw more younger kids in with some added sugar. And so there's definitely places where you might get a bubble tea and it's just an instant mix of ingredients. There's not necessarily a lot of tea in there, but there are a lot of places where they actually will brew real tea and, you know, mix all the ingredients together in order to make the bubble tea. So it's definitely, I would say bubble tea is been around for probably since about the 80s, but it's definitely something I think it's become incredibly popular. You almost can't go anywhere without seeing a bubble tea shop now.
Exactly. And it's almost like it's become a part of the culture. It's become a part. Ah, there it is. I
You
knew
gotta
it.
have some tea, yeah.
I knew it. I knew it. And so, what is the best? What is the most unique way, or best way to enjoy a good brew? Is it to boil it? And I've seen so many different types now because it's like they have the tea bags that you put in, then they have the curry cups, and then they have where you can actually take the petals and the essence of the leaves, and there's specialized pots that you can put it in. You just pour hot water over the leaves, and it's able to separate the juices and the minerals and everything. What is the best way to consume a good brew?
Yeah, so I think one of the best things about tea is that there really isn't a best way.
Mm,
There's so many ways you can do it that it's kind of whatever works best for you, whatever works for the time you're brewing, how you're brewing, what you're brewing. Each type of tea has a different way that may be recommended. And there's some like general guidelines that might be out there for tea, but the good news is that it's what matters is that if you enjoy it. So I always encourage people to experiment, try brewing teas in different ways. You don't necessarily have to follow the instructions of how a company might say to brew or how, a blog or a website might tell you to do it. You can definitely play with tea and have fun with it. It's not so like rigid and black and white that you have to do it a certain way. So it's definitely, I think that's the fun of tea. Really the main thing is to have a way to contain your tea leaves if you're using a loose leaf tea, because if tea brews for too long, it can become very, very bitter and unpleasant. And if you enjoy bitter tea, that's great. But if you don't like bitterness, that's where you want to make sure to have a way to remove your leaves. So like, for example, the tea I made today, my mug just has this simple infuser basket where the leaves are in there, and I can just pull that right out, separate the leaves, and I can enjoy my tea without it becoming over steeped. And I can use those leaves to brew another second cup after too.
so you can reuse those leaves again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the big advantage with loose leaf tea is you can brew the tea more than once. So you do get a bit more bang for your buck that way. Where tea bags, the leaves are cut into very small pieces because they're meant to brew very quickly. But that also means that you're not going to really get a second brew out of them because they put all of their flavor out in the first one.
That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. I told y'all. I told y'all. Miss Nicole Wilson here on the Gentleman Style Podcast, spilling tea. Literally spilling the tea. Absolutely. Are there any unusual teas you think everyone should try that you found everyone should try at least once?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I would say one that a lot of people may not be familiar with is a type of tea from China called pu'er. And the cool thing about pu'er is that it's a fermented tea.
Mm.
So most tea kind of has a shelf life of maybe about a year where you want to drink it before that point, because it won't go bad, but it will start to lose its flavor over time. Where pu'er is interesting because it's actually meant to be aged. So the tea will actually continue to change over time, and people will store the teas for decades to change the flavor. So it's a really interesting taste that I think a lot of people maybe aren't familiar with, but I think it's one that is definitely worth trying if you haven't had it before.
Love it, love it, love it. Do you grow your own tea leaves?
I have tried. It's really hard to grow tea. It's a pretty
It's
picky.
hard.
Yeah, yeah. So it's It's a pretty picky plant, which always gives me appreciation really for the tea I drink because I tried and failed miserably every time I've tried. So I had some tea seeds that I grew, and a squirrel came and like chewed off all the branches and killed all my plants.
Oh my gosh.
um,
Fired. That
yeah,
squirrel is fired.
he definitely was. And then I got bigger, I got more mature plants, thinking that maybe those would be better. They're less sensitive to squirrels attacking them. But we had a sudden cold snap. And frost plants don't necessarily do well with, and so they just didn't quite come back from that. So it's really interesting that they can grow these big farms with all these teas and make all this tea for us to drink, but it's just growing one little tea plant was like really really hard.
It's difficult. It needs a perfect environment. You almost might need, it sounds like you need people, we need a greenhouse almost,
Yeah.
an enclosed space that we can constantly keep it protected.
Yeah, there's actually a place in Michigan that does that. They grow their tea in a warehouse since Michigan's very cold a lot of the time. So they have a farm where they grow their tea inside the greenhouse.
Do you travel to try all the different teas, or do you?
So I haven't gotten to travel to like a tea producing country yet. That's
Okay.
definitely on my list. Japan is kind of my hope for the near future. I definitely try to travel to a lot of different places in the country though. I went to like a tea festival in Toronto last year, so that was really fun. At the end of the month, I'm going to World Tea Expo, which is like the big tea industry trade show. So it's kind of like it's a business to business show, but it's where kind of you see all the new things that are coming out. So I'm definitely excited to see what's coming down the pipeline for tea.
So this is a expo that is displaying up and coming
Yeah,
teas, and
yeah, exactly.
and this is coming to like Walmart, the U.S. market, or
So it's basically it's a business to business show. So most of the vendors that are there are wholesalers. And so a lot of the people that attend the show are people who are looking to buy tea for their tea shops or grocery stores or wherever they may be buying tea for.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Absolutely incredible. Miss Nicole Wilson on the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. You guys, speaking of tea, we got to take a tea break, and we got to pay some bills and pay our sponsors. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Hey guys, this is your boy Marcus Norman of the Gentleman Style Podcast Show, and we are here in Patrick Henry Mall, Newport News, Virginia. We're actually here for something unique just inside. Something new, brand new that we want to explore together. You guys ready? All right, here we go. Hey, boss. Heard you are an athlete, man. See you at the mall every day. We are at Patrick Henry Mall, living up, and we are talking about CBD. But first off, the normal thing that we all deal with is joint pain, back pain, suffer from everything.
Neck pain, too.
Neck pain? You got some neck pain?
All the time, man. I'm getting up in age, you know what I'm saying? We're not young no more.
I'm with you. I'm totally with you. Bruh, CBD helps with that exact same thing. Neck pain, back pain, joint pain, all the pains, everywhere pain, right? And so that's what CBD does. That's what we're here to help you and me do. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
All right.
CBD is one of the most powerful cannabinoids because all it's focused on is the health and wellness. We're talking helping people with anxiety, depression, insomnia, sleep deprivation, all provided. CBD works with the natural mechanics of your body without the crazy side effects of Western medicine. So these products are here to actually align your body and get it back right so we can actually have a better quality of life. And that's what CBD does. We are back to Gentleman Style Podcast Show, and we have the incredible, amazing Miss Nicole Wilson here spreading the joy and the fascination and the education around tea. And touching on education, your blog has been running. You've been running your blog since 2008, and now you teach and educate others on the many fascinations and the uniqueness around tea that people overlook outside because everybody, I think when you and I first reached out, when I first reached out to you, it was, you were like, listen, I'm more than just health and wellness about tea. There's a whole world, there's a whole universe to what you do. And so when you teach to and educate others on tea, what is the specific methodology, or how do you tailor your teaching approach for different audiences, from beginners to experts to the in-betweens? How do you cater that into your teachings?
Yeah, so I would say it's always my goal to make tea approachable. Similar to wine or other things that might have a connoisseurship to it, there can be a bit of like snobbishness that exists that really almost gatekeeps and scares people away from trying something. Where I always, try my best to make sure that everyone feels included and feels that they can approach tea regardless of their knowledge level. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, just like I said before, I'm still learning about tea. There's always something more to learn and something more to discover. So that's always my goal, is to really make sure that everyone feels that through whether the content I'm making or class I'm teaching, that they're really getting that message.
Absolutely. And you've also been teaching since 2008 as well?
So teaching kind of was an evolution. When I first started my blog, a lot of what I was writing about was like product reviews. I started writing more educational articles because people were asking me a lot of questions about tea. And so I, started answering some of those questions through my content. And for a little while, I struggled with really like what to call myself, what my place in the tea industry is. I tried on lots of different titles and things to try to figure that out. And I was asking for advice in a Facebook group for content creators. And a really insightful person commented, "Oh, you're a tea educator." And that was a total light bulb moment for me, because it had really been what I had been doing all along. I just didn't have that name for it. But that really became the impetus for the direction I've been going the last few years. So I took a course through Being Tea, which is a tea education, tea teacher training. So it's actually a course to learn how to be a better tea teacher. And that was really super helpful. And it's definitely kind of become, I think, my new calling in a way of, sharing tea with people and really teaching tea, where I hadn't necessarily had that name for it before then.
That I love that, because it shows that networking is powerful. And networking, you were able to discover who you are and fine tune who you are in this new not new niche, but niche of yours, and define yourself for something you have been doing for a long time, right? You didn't have a
Yeah.
name for it. So super super powerful. And that person that gave you the nugget, the golden nugget, shout out to them as well. I want to talk about your website. What can people expect from this incredible, very well done website? What should people look for on when connecting to your website, for the connoisseur watching this?
Yeah, so I would say when you first go on the main page, those are kind of my most recent blog posts. But there's definitely a lot to explore also. I would say if you're just getting started in tea, definitely my beginner's guide to tea is a great place to start. I've kind of listed out some of my most helpful blog posts, I would say, by different categories, depending on what you're looking to learn about. So like there's tea basics, all the different types of tea, different tea ware, tea history. If you're just getting started, this is a really great place to figure out where you want to dive off into first, without like having to go through. I have at this point I have thousands of blog posts, so that can be a lot to like navigate through and find things. So this kind of helps break it down a little bit better so that you can find what might be most helpful to you if you're just starting.
Love it.
And I have, also pages on matcha and pour, since those are kind of the two types of teas I find people need the most or are looking for the most help with. I also have a page on tea places in NYC. So I live in New Jersey, but I'm close to New York City, and I love going to different tea places there. So it's kind of like I have it separated by neighborhood. So that way, if you're visiting New York City, it makes it really easy to find a good tea place, depending on what part of the city you're in.
So these are tea places that you have traveled to personally and have
Yeah,
vetted and
exactly.
tested. Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
So that Nicole Wilson stamp of approval on
Yeah,
your on that front door. Look for that front door.
yeah, right? The Yelp sticker to put on their door.
You should. You should. It's the Nicole Wilson Tea Educator stamp of approval. So you guys, if you're looking for something outside of Starbucks, right? If you're looking for something outside of Dunkin' Donuts, here's the next best thing. And I find that it's the mom and pops, right? It's the mom and pops. It's the people who really have a passion for it, make the best and brew the best flavors of tea. And I feel like my girl and I, we found a a actual tea house, right? There's a tea house, and I think it's more defined in China, where it's like
Mhm.
a tea house, like all of our tea. We don't serve anything else except teas, but we found one here locally here in our market. We're in Virginia, and we did a Bridgerton experience.
Oh,
And
that's
so
awesome.
the whole experience, and I found a tea, never heard of it, never heard of it, and it was the most delicious thing I had ever tasted. And we drink tea, we don't drink coffee, and so it was the most delicious ever. And I find that when you peel back the layers and you really go out on a self-discovery mission, you'll find some of the most delicious tasting brew. Like I see you have it on your shelf right there, and I want that. That tea brewing, it looks like
Yeah,
a tree,
yeah.
and it starts at the top and it pours in the bottom. All you got to do is like move the little ball a little bit. I
Yes.
want that because it creates a whole new experience. It's not just taste, it's not just flavor, it's not just notes. It's the experience. There's an experience behind tea,
Yeah,
especially
absolutely.
when in this crazy world that we're having. And so you are necessary, and it's absolutely crucial and paramount on what you do. So I
Thank you.
applaud you, Miss Wilson, for what you do, because
Thank you very much.
it's definitely needed. And so um I forgot where I was going with that, but I wanted to touch on matcha because
Yeah.
I it's that is the new kid on the block. Is matcha a tea, or is matcha something else completely different? Is
Yeah.
that a whole
So
new thing?
matcha is a green tea. It's a shade-grown green tea from Japan that's ground into a powder. And so what's interesting is matcha has really been around since the samurai era in Japan. It's just become incredibly, incredibly trendy the last few years. Right now, it's so trendy that there's a matcha shortage. Um, so matcha, it's a tea that does take quite a lot to produce it, and because it became so popular, the demand outpaced supply. So we're all waiting for the spring so that the new harvest of tea can be made so that we can have more matcha, which is really interesting to see that happening. As I've been into matcha for really quite some time, almost as long as I've had my blog. But it's just the trajectory for matcha has gone up, up, up in that time.
So as you're teaching it, as you're educating other and you have these classes, do you give out samples of the various teas? Have you ever do you do that at all?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting for me because I don't sell tea. So it's almost sometimes people like they misunderstand and they think I have a tea store or things like that. So usually if I'm having a class, I will source a particular tea that I you know is a good kind of focus point for whatever I may be teaching about. It really just depends on the class. At the end of last year, I did a class locally here in New Jersey that was just like an intro to tea. And so I kind of picked a few different examples of each type of tea for us to taste together, just to help them kind of just explore the world of tea and what it has to offer. Um, Usually whenever people ask, I'll always be happy to share what company I got my tea from, so that they can go and get it themselves. But in a way, because I write about so many teas on my blog and I help support so many small tea companies in doing that, I wouldn't want to compete with them in doing that. I would almost feel, I don't know, like it would be a conflict of interest if I sold tea. So it is
Mm.
a tricky thing because sometimes people really expect me to be able to sell them tea. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I thought that was a normal progression because you write so delicately on your blog, you write so incredibly detailed on your blog that it almost begs. Is that coming down the pipeline? You think maybe for
Uh,
Teamy Please?
I don't think for me necessarily.
Okay.
I think, I always say I love tea too much to be able to make a profit. I definitely think that's part of it there. But there's definitely like so much more I want to do with teas. So I definitely think there's a lot more room for like expansion and new things. But I don't think I'll actually end up selling tea. I wrote a book in 2022, so that I think was a good like first step. I definitely would like to write more books in the future. I would like to develop like an online tea class for people who maybe don't have a tea shop near them where they can access things and learn things. So I think there's definitely like lots of things on the horizon that I can explore without selling tea.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
And that's a unique challenge. You heard about the challenge, y'all, earlier that she said she faced when trying to brew tea herself. And, just the change in weather and just it's such a sensitive plant, right? It needs to be tended to. It's not a set it and forget it type of thing. And then the other challenge is, right, she tries so many varieties that it will be hard and almost a conflict of interest for her to sit there and say, this is the best tea. Try this tea because now the competition is like, whoa, 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 whoa. Have you been approached by companies and organizations wanting you to kind of show some love? Let's say it like that. Show some
Yeah.
love to their brand of tea.
Yeah, so I definitely do. Almost kind of like most influencers, I definitely do get companies reach out to me and want to send me products. It's a tricky thing because over the years I've really like narrowed what I do. When you first start any new hobby, you want anything and everything related to that hobby because you're so excited about it and you want to do all the things and taste all the things and then as you go down the line and you have more experience, you're maybe a little bit more picky about what you want, what you think you will enjoy. And so that's been part of that for me is, I really only review teas that are pure, so no flavors added, and also that are directly sourced. So someone who's working directly with a tea producer, where, when I first started my blog, I noticed I actually had multiple companies send me the same tea because they were buying from the same wholesaler. And so
Wow.
I was tasting the tea. I was like, I know I've had this before. And I figured out that they had basically, which is totally fine if you're a tea house and you're buying from a wholesaler, but it's not a unique product necessarily if other people are buying that same tea. And so I kind of had to narrow my approach in what I'm willing to write about because of that. I didn't want to just be writing about the same teas all the time with all these different names on it when it's the same product.
Love it. Love it. A heart of pure gold, y'all. She doesn't want to sacrifice. She's not going to sacrifice quality over these brands. And she's there. You have it. She had two same brand, same taste, and that just goes to distinguishing how refined her palate is. That she can recognize that this is the same. I've had this before. This tastes familiar. This is not different, even though it came from two different places. The originator or the origin of it came from the same place. And so that's very powerful. I wanted to ask a question about something else on your blog,
Sure.
on your website. You have a section that's called tea wear. So tea wear, what is that about? Can you explain what
Yes,
tea wear is? Is there an outfit I need to have when I drink tea?
No, so teaware is basically just the name for like all of the teapots, teacups, all of the things that you'll use to brew your tea. It's like everything I have on my shelf here behind me. Really just all of the tools that you use to make tea are what we refer to as teaware.
Absolutely. Okay, that's fair. I was getting concerned. I was like, there's an outfit to this? Like I'm
I
supposed to
do have a very large collection of tea-themed t-shirts though.
have Love it. I wanted to ask you to debunk this, and I needed your help to that young person out there because I find that more and more people, and this is almost scary to me, that people are not they're not explorers. They're not explorers when it comes to venturing out and trying new things. They kind of find their one lane and then they stay in it. What would you say to that young man, that young woman out in the audience watching you today? How do you encourage people to explore tea beyond their comfort zone and to explore and get out? What positive things would you say to them, that young boy, that young girl who's just kind of stuck in a lane and stuck in a rut and it's like, okay, I drink this tea, I'm stuck on the boba and that's it.
Yeah, so I definitely encourage everyone to explore tea. I know we've talked about, that there's thousands of different varieties. And so, sometimes people get an idea in their head of what tea is. For example, here in the US, when you say tea, most people might think of like a Lipton tea bag that you'll get handed when you're at like a diner and you order a cup of tea. And not that there's anything wrong with that. If that's what you enjoy, that's great. But tea is so much more than that. And I definitely encourage, if you've tried one tea and you didn't like it, don't let that stop you from trying different types of tea, because just because you like that one thing doesn't mean you won't like the other types of tea. I find also the more you drink tea and try different teas, your palate will change over time. When I first started drinking tea, I was pretty picky and I added a lot of like sugar often, or honey or agave to my tea. But over time, that really changed and I became much more adventurous in trying different teas. I don't add any sweetener anymore, which, if that's what you enjoy, that's great. But if you add sweetener, you're really almost not tasting the tea that's underneath. And so eventually, as your palate learns to appreciate those more subtle flavors, you'll find that you actually enjoy it more if you don't add anything to it. So I think that's definitely, tea is a journey. So also, like, don't be hard on yourself and think that you have to know everything right away. It's something that I'm still learning and you're still going to learn, even if you just started. There's so much more that you have to explore and learn and experience, that like expecting yourself to know everything right away, in a way, will set yourself up for failure before you even really get started.
That's facts. That's big facts. And I love how you put it so delicately. And it's like, listen, try new things, be open to it. Don't be afraid, and open your mind, open your horizon. And you have caught me, ma'am, because I add honey to my tea. So she's speaking to me, y'all. She guilt tripped me, she caught me. And I don't know if that's just habit. Again, we have been trained to just, go to the Starbucks and just drown it in milk and sugar upon sugar, but because we're chasing the caffeine rush. And so, when I transitioned over to teas, I kept that same habit, right, of just adding additives to it instead of appreciating it for just itself. And so I don't know if that's the American way. I don't know if that's just, you know, poor education, which is why you do so well, because there's an education piece that needs to be done. So, that's huge. Can you share any memorable moments from your tea workshops or classes that just really kind of like, I'm the tea educator, I'm the tea doctor, right? That's the next, that's the next certification. That's the next step. Can you share any memorable moments?
Yeah, it was actually interesting that that introduction to tea class I did here in New Jersey. My mom attended my class, and she's always been very stuck in her ways. She drinks her black tea bags with milk and sugar, and that's what she drinks. Over the years, she's like tried some of my teas, but she's never really liked any of
What?
them. But during that class, she actually found several teas that she really enjoyed, and she was like, "Oh, this doesn't even need any sugar." Like she was surprised herself in finding a tea that she really liked, that wasn't what she normally drinks. And so that was definitely like a yes moment for me. That
So can you share what that tea was? What was the tea that doesn't require any sugar? 'Cause I need that tea.
Yeah. So I made sencha, which is a type of Japanese green tea. It's very it Japanese green teas are interesting because for some people they maybe at first are thrown back by the teas because they can be a little grassy, but they also have a really nice sweetness to them, that I think almost like surprises people when they do taste a really good Japanese green tea. So I would definitely say, if you do like green tea, sencha is definitely a really good one to try.
And that's sencha as in Sencha.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, because I'm on the blog, y'all. So I'm
Oh
stalking it. I'm
yeah.
I'm learning as we go. So there's a whole culture, right? There's a whole metaverse, there's a whole universe to this, y'all. It's not just health and wellness, there's a whole tradition and culture and mindset behind tea. And so when do you typically drink tea? Or when do you find the best time for you to consume tea? Is it beginning of the day, midday, all day, evenings, right before bed? When do you find the time?
So I drink tea all day when I can. It really just depends. When I'm at work, I can't necessarily have tea when I'm at work. It just like where I work, it just doesn't work.
Ooh.
So I know, but when I'm home, I really try to enjoy tea as much as I can. So Sunday's always like tea day because I'm not at work that I can just have tea all day. It definitely depends on like the time of day. Like right now, I'm drinking shomei, which is a Chinese white tea. And the good thing about shomei is that it's lower in caffeine. So right now it's a little after 8 o'clock here. So it's getting a bit later. I don't want something that's really going to hype me up before I wind down for the day. Where if it's morning, I may want something that gives you that little bit of a boost to start your day. So it really just depends on the situation and like what might be going on that day as to what I might be drinking. The thing about caffeine is everyone's a little different on what your sensitivity is. So I know people who can't drink tea past like a certain time in the afternoon or they'll be up all night. Thankfully, I'm not super sensitive. I think just because I drink quite so much tea all the time.
She's immune.
So yeah, at this point I can probably drink tea and just go right to bed and it'll be fine.
She's pushed past her kryptonite, y'all. And so a white tea and a green tea and a black tea, that all speaks to what you talked about earlier as far as oxidation goes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just how the leaves are processed. So if you take leaves from the tea plant, you can turn those leaves to any of the different types of tea just based on how you process them. And so that's a super fascinating thing for me for tea that you can get so many different tastes from just one plant. So white tea is very light because the leaves aren't processed very much. They're really just dried. So it's almost like the tea's kind of in its natural state. Where green tea, they'll apply heat. Usually like Chinese teas will be pan roasted. So they almost get like a sweeter nutty taste to them, where Japanese teas are steamed. So they kind of have almost more vegetal quality to them. And then black tea is fully oxidized. So that's definitely got a like much more like a darker, more robust taste to it.
Love it. Love it. Love it. This is incredible. This is a fascinating episode. And I love this. Miss Nicole Wilson spilling the facts on tea, y'all. You see that? Y'all see what I did there? That calming allure.
Yeah.
This is tea time. Tea time.
Yeah.
Miss Wilson, how can people connect with you? How can people get on board with what you're doing? You are on a mission and you're changing the minds of everyone near and far across the globe. How can people connect? How can people get on board with what you're doing?
You can find the blog at teaformeplease.com. I'm also at Tea For Me Please on pretty much every social media platform, except TikTok. I'm the real Tea For Me Please because someone took my name there.
Oh, someone stole your name?
They took the username before I signed up for TikTok. Yeah, so I tried to message them and say, hey, I've been Tea For Me Please for 16 years. Can I please have it? And they never responded. So
Shame on them. Filthy. So but you are on TikTok.
Yes. So TikTok, it's just the real Tea For Me Please.
The real Tea For Me Please. So this is incredible, y'all. There you have it. This incredible woman spilling the tea on Gentleman Style Podcast Show. And for our audio listeners, that's teaformeplease.com. One word, no hyphens, no spaces, no numbers. teaformeplease.com. Check her out. She's absolutely phenomenal. Again, if you want a deeper experience outside of the health and wellness and you want to understand, why am I addicted to this thing that doesn't have cocaine in it? Why am I addicted to this thing, this substance, this liquid, and it's delicious? And there's so many varieties. I'm actually curious and I want to try. I think I've been searching for that. I've been searching for a tea. And I think it was when I went to that tea house, it was a green tea I was drinking that didn't require any sweeteners. So I'm going to check out the Sencha because I think that's going to be my new bag. And I think that's going to be the new way. If I can just have no additives to it and just drink it right out of brewing, then that's the tea for me. Because I like sweet.
Yeah, definitely give it a try.
Super dope. Super dope. Powerful. We gotta let this incredible woman go, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was insightful. I hope this was educational. And I hope this helps you take your tea knowledge and your tea education to the next level. This is fantastic. And I want to say this to you publicly, Miss Wilson. Never give up. Don't give up what you're doing. Appreciate what you're doing. You are necessary. So, like we end every show, take care of your friends, take care of your family, and always take care of business. This is Marcus, your favorite gentleman, and the incredible Nicole Wilson signing off. Love you guys. Bye.